Let's say we want to build an HTML editor. In case you're not familiar with HTML, it's basically a markup language that we use to represent web pages. So in our command package, I'm going to add a new package called editor. Then here we add a new class called HTML document. In this class, we need a field of type string called content. Let's generate a getter and a setter for this field. Beautiful. Now let's move the field to the top. Good. Here we should also have a method for making the text bold. So public void make bold. Now we're going to set the content to something like this. So these are tags in HTML. B is short for bold. We are wrapping the content inside a bold tag. Okay. So this is where we're implementing the actual business logic. This document class knows how to make itself bold. Okay. Now let's introduce the command interface. I'm not going to use the command interface that we declared in the FX package because that was a different project. That was for a graphical user interface framework. So let's quickly add a new interface in this package. We can call it command or action, either works. So here's the command interface with the execute method. Now we should introduce another interface called undoable command. So undoable command. This interface should extend the command interface. So every undoable command is a command object. But here we have an extra method that is onExecute. Good. Next, we need to create our history class. So let's add a new class called history. This is pretty straightforward. We need a list of command objects, or we can make this a list of undoable commands. We can only store commands that we can undo. And we set this to a new array list. Now here we need two methods, push and pop. Here's the push method that takes an undoable command and adds it to our list. So commands that add command. Now implementing the pop method using a list is a little bit tedious. So I'm going to replace this list with the deck interface. This is short for double-ended queue. It's a special queue data structure that allows us to add objects from either side of a queue, from the front or from the rear. So let's import the deck interface. Now, instead of array list, we're going to use array deck. That is a class that implements the deck interface. Now let's implement the pop method. So we want to return an undoable command. The implementation is going to be super simple. We no longer have to calculate the index of the last item, then remove it and return it. We simply return commands dot pop. As simple as that. So let's quickly recap what we have done so far. We implemented our business logic inside this HTML document class. This knows absolutely nothing about commands. So this is part of the business layer of an application. Commands are the link between user interface objects and business objects. So we introduced the command interface as well as the undoable command. And we also added this history class for keeping track of the commands that we have applied. Now let's create a concrete implementation of the command interface. So here we add a new class. We call it bold command. This is going to be an undoable command. So it should implement the undoable command interface. Let's implement the methods. So IntelliJ is telling us that here we have two methods, onExecute, which is part of the undoable command interface, and execute, which we have inherited from the command interface. So, okay. Now in this class, we want to store the previous content of our document. So we need a few fields. The first one is a string field called previous content. We also need a reference to a document object because in this command, we're simply delegating the work to that document object. That is where we have all the business logic, okay? So private HTML document. By the way, we have two HTML document classes here. The first one is the one that we just created. We have another implementation in this package, javax.swing.whatever. We don't want that one. So let's call this field document. We also need a reference to a history object. Once again, here we have two implementations of this history class. The first implementation is the one in this package, in the command package. Here's a previous implementation that we created when I talked about the memento pattern. We're going to use the first implementation. Now we should initialize this command and history objects via a constructor. So let's generate a constructor and initialize these two fields. So we select these and OK. So here we have a constructor with two parameters, HTML document and history. Beautiful. Now the final part. When we execute this command, first we should store the previous content of the document. So previous content equals document.getContent. Next, we should tell the document object to make itself bold. So document.make it bold. We're delegating or forwarding the actual work to this business object. And finally, we tell the history to record this command. So history.push this, the current object. Now, if you want to unexecute this command, we simply set the content of the document to the previous content. Okay? Let's test our implementation up to this point. So we go to our main class. Let's create a history object, new history. We're going to use the implementation in the command package. Okay? Next, we create a document object, a new HTML document. Now, initially, we want to set the content of this document to hello world. Next, we're going to create a command object. So somewhere in our application, this command object is linked with a button or a menu item. Okay, so we create a bold command object, new bold command. Now here we need to pass a reference to a document and a history object. So document and history. Next, we execute this command. Now to verify that our implementation is correct, let's print the content of the document after we execute this command. So we call document.getContent. Run. So our content is wrapped inside the bold tag. Beautiful. Now let's unexecute this command. So we call bold command.unexecute. Once again, we're going to print the content of this document. So here's the original content. So our implementation is correct. However, we are not going to directly call the unexecute method of this command because somewhere else in our application, we have an undo command. That command should be linked to the undo menu item that we have on top of the application's window. So instead of calling the unexecute method, we should create an undo command object. So in this package, let's add a new class, undo command. This is going to implement the command interface. We can only execute it. It doesn't make sense to unexecute an undo command. So implement methods. Now here we should take the last command that was applied and unexecute it. So we need a reference to a history object. Let's declare a private field of type history and initialize it using a constructor. Now I'm going to move this up. Good. So in the execute method, we're going to call history.pop. This will give us the last command that was applied. And then we can call the unexecute method on that object. Now, there is a problem with this implementation. What if there is nothing in the history? This code is going to throw an exception. So I would prefer to go in the history class and introduce a new method called size. So public integer size. Here we return commands.size. So we know how many commands we have stored in the history. Now, back in the undo command class, before we execute this code, first we check to see if history has at least one command. Then we'll pop it and unexecute it. That is a safer implementation. Now the last part. We go to our main method. Now that we have an undo command, we can use it directly. So let's create an undo object. Here we should pass our history. So both these commands are talking to the same history object. This is the beauty of an object-oriented system. All these classes, all these objects can collaborate to perform a complex task. So here we have an undo command. And then we can call the execute method. At this point, the bold text should be reverted to its original state. So let's print the content of the document. Run. There you go. Beautiful. So this is how we implement the undo operation using the command pattern.